Hi, and welcome to the Caterpillar Cross Stitch YouTube channel. My name's Ford from Son of a Stitch. This week I'm going to do something a little bit different from my usual content, and I'm just going to tell you why I love cross stitch so much. Okay, first things first, please go subscribe to the channel and like this video. It makes a really big difference for me if you do those things, because that's the biggest way I can tell whether or not people are watching. So please hit those for me. But I want to just explain to you how I got into cross stitching to begin with. I had tried a bunch of other crafts, and I've always been kind of a crafty person. I sew some of my own costumes, I make some clothes, I repair things, I do a lot of different crafts. But I never really latched on to one the way I did with cross stitching. I'd tried crochet before and I just couldn't get the tension right, and I got frustrated with it really easily. I tried knitting, but I just could not get the muscle memory down. My body just refused to remember how to do it. And so I wasn't super hopeful when my dear friend Jen told me that they wanted to show me how to do cross stitching. And I was like, I've tried other things. I didn't really think it was going to take. But they showed me a piece that they had done that was like a cross stitch inspired by a Banksy mural, and I was like blown away. It hadn't occurred to me that you could do those kinds of things in cross stitch, and that got me really, really excited about the medium. The reason I didn't really think it was going to take for me is because at the time I was undiagnosed ADHD. I've since gotten a diagnosis for ADHD, and of course everything in my life went, oh, that makes so much more sense now. But because of those ADHD tendencies that I had, I didn't think I was really going to enjoy cross stitch, because it seems kind of like slow and tedious and like it would be really hard to focus on. But the thing that I discovered is that it actually really calms and soothes my ADHD. I used to frequently, when I was working full-time, keep a project at my desk, and when I would start to get overwhelmed or too scatterbrained or too uncentered and unfocused, I could pick up my project and I could literally just do 5 or 6 stitches, and the amount of focus that that would take me would really just kind of calm things back down. And then I could look at my desk and start to prioritize, which was always one of the hardest things for me to do, was make that executive function and decide, okay, this, I'll do as much of this as I can. So the ability to take the project and work on it for just a minute would really like quiet all of that, and was really one of my coping mechanisms for ADHD, rather than ADHD being a barrier to it. So that's one of the things that I've really, really liked about it. And part of the reason it's stuck with me, where every other craft I've ever tried has eventually kind of fallen off and I've gotten bored of it. I want to take just a second to remind you to join the Caterpillar Cross Stitch VIP Stitch Club. When you join, you'll get an ebook with 8 free PDF cross stitch patterns in it, plus a cool new year-long temperature tracking pattern. You'll also get a digital download of our top 10 cross-stitching tips and all of the latest Caterpillar cross-stitch news, including advance notice anytime there's going to be a new retreat, so that you can get your tickets before they sell out. So hit the link down there in the description to make sure that you don't miss any of that. Another thing that really interests me about cross-stitch is this idea of what is art and what is craft, right? I frequently will refer to like fiber artists rather than crafters, because as a society we tend to undervalue things that we think of as craft versus what we consider to be art, right? Like oil paintings are high art and therefore they're way more valuable and valued, whereas fiber arts are things that actually take at least as much skill much of the time and definitely take a lot longer to do, but we don't really value them. I've had people offered to pay me to do cross stitches, like how much would it cost me to have you make one of those? And I'd like do the math and be like, okay, I stitch this fast, this is going to take me about 20 hours. I don't work for less than $20 an hour, so it's going to cost you at least $400 plus materials. And they're always like, nope, I'll learn to stitch myself. That's okay. People aren't willing to pay you to do something like that. They're willing to pay way more than that for high art, but we don't value craft in that way as a society. So that's one of the things that really interests me. And there's a pretty easy way to tell whether we're going to call it art or whether we're going to call it craft. And that is it mostly done by men or is it mostly done by women? And that defiance of expectation as a man is one of the things that I really enjoy about cross-stitching too, because people are often surprised when they find out that it's my chosen hobby, and in fact, my job, what I do for a living. Now, I love sharing my cross-stitch knowledge with people on YouTube, but there are tons of other ways that people learn about cross-stitch, and one of the best ones is with mutual online communities, things like the Caterpillar Cross Stitch Facebook group and Instagram. Go and join that group and follow that Instagram. There's a tremendous wealth of knowledge available there to help you step up your cross-stitching game. You have to bear with me for just a minute here because my next point gets a little bit in the weeds before I can make any sense of it for you, which is in 1066, William the Conqueror, the Norman, invaded England. And a lot of what we know about what happened on that actual day is because it was recorded shortly thereafter in a tapestry, a large embroidered tapestry called the Bayeux Tapestry. And it has a lot of depictions of what happened, including of like King Edward, the king that was defeated at that battle, getting an arrow through his eye and dying as a consequence. So a lot of what happened there we know because of this tapestry that survives to this day, nearly 1,000 years later. And then about 20 years after that, William wanted to know what it was he had just conquered, what he owned, how many people, how many livestock, how much land. And so he commissioned this survey, this census of everything and everyone that was in his kingdom. This was in about 1085 to 1090, somewhere around there. And all of this was recorded into what is called the Domesday Book. And that book still survives to this day. So a lot of what we know about medieval England and medieval Europe is because of the longevity of this Domesday Book. So this was, again, over 900 years ago that this was done. So to celebrate the 900th anniversary of the Domesday Book, the BBC commissioned a project they called Domesday 2. Mostly this was done by school children. They gathered information about everything that existed in the world. They had them all bring it in. They collected it. They put it into these computers. It was recorded onto discs. It was a giant database of information about everyone and everything in England. That was less than 40 years ago. We cannot access that information because we don't have anything that can read those discs, and those discs are badly degraded. So a mere 40 years later and 1,000 years worth of technological advancements has made it so that we can't read that information. So the longevity of these older media, the older ways of recording things, is the thing that really interests and fascinates me. So today when you buy a movie, or when you buy a song, or when you buy even often a work of art, what you have is not actually that work of art, that book, for instance. If you buy a book, most of the time it's a digital book, and a lot of court precedent says that you don't actually own that. They didn't sell you that book, they sold you that license. So 50 years ago, you went out a book, you owned that book. That was your book. You could write in it, you could lend it out, you could sell it to someone, you could cut it up to make ransom notes or found erotica or whatever you wanted to do with it. But today, you don't own that book. And not that long from now, probably you won't even be able to access it. So this sort of ephemeral nature of our media and the things that we create and that we consume is a common theme that runs throughout my own work and a thing that really interests me. So I like to take these digital things, especially visual things, which are just pixels, little squares of color that we view in aggregate and then they form an image. And I like to take those pixels and I like to turn them into physical objects. I like to turn them into cross stitches because they're just pixels. They're just squares of color. So they're already the same thing, except that one is real and I own it, and the other is not real and I don't own it according to the licenses. So that's a really interesting concept to me and a thing that I like to play with a lot. And part of the reason that cross stitch really fulfills me artistically is because I'm sort of toying with that concept, and also why I do so many pieces that are cultural mashups, and why I really like to create juxtapositions between the antiquity of the medium that I'm using and the modernness of the content that I'm creating. So those are things that I'm frequently exploring in my cross-stitch fiber arts. Now, if you're here watching me blather on about the finer points of cross-stitch and how it relates to William the Conqueror, then you're probably really interested in it too. What is it that you love about cross-stitching? Let people know in the comments down below. I'd really like to see what other people experience and why other people do it. So hit the comments and let me know. I do want to thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, again, please subscribe to the channel and like this video. For Caterpillar Cross Stitch, my name is Ford, and I will see you next time.